Hi, Joe.
Hey Midori, how you doing?
I am very happy right now because two reasons. One, there's sun in San Francisco,
Even in
which
my
makes me
part of town.
happy.
Yeah.
Yes. And I am probably, oh, you're a therapist, you'll know this term, and some of the viewers might as well. I am I have undiagnosed seasonal affective, which means
Yeah.
sunlight affects my mood immediately.
Right.
Yes. And second reason I'm happy is that you have consented to showing up on my Consent Dojo.
I'm so excited to be here. I got to watch last time and it was so great to see Marcia B, and I'll talk a little bit because she and I have some history and I really would love to build on some of the things that the two of you talked about.
Yep. And to remind you and the viewers, this is happening live, 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 live. And we are being viewed by a lot of people. Though, for those of you who are members, you can put in questions in the chat. All right. And this is free to the public as a public service discussion from Shibari Study. And this video of our conversation will be available for free on the Shibari Study platform for the next 30 days. And then after 30 days, I get to have the video and post it for my members in Patreon. So my past videos of Consent Dojo, if you're curious, because I assign homework, it is over at patreon.com/Planet Midori. The last one, I think, with Marsha B is still up. So we encourage you
Yeah, I
to.
watched it, I think for another few days. Oh, it looks like we may have missed Midori. So as she logs back in, why don't I go ahead and introduce myself? My name is Joe Zarate-Sanderlin. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist based in San Francisco. My pronouns are they, them, so I would appreciate you using them. I have a private practice here in San Francisco that is focused on working with sexuality diversity, relationship diversity. So I work a lot with non-monogamy. I work with kink relationships. And I also try to take the knowledge and the wisdom that I've gained from kink and non-monogamy and help clients who aren't necessarily in those communities. My background, I worked in book publishing for a while. I worked as an IT director in a law firm, and I draw on that in terms of doing my work now. And I've been licensed now for going on 8 years, but practicing since 2006. Interestingly enough, I mentioned a connection with Marcia B. She and I lived in New York around the same time and then moved to California around the same time. And I know she talked a little bit about Cuddle Party last time. When Marcia and Reed were developing Cuddle Party, they had a beta test the um, of the interestingly enough, I mentioned pardon me for one moment. And I was in that beta test. So I have a little bit of a parallel when it comes to the work with Marcia B. In terms of my kink and non-monogamy background, Midori, I just slipped right into introducing myself.
Oh, great.
Um,
I'm back again. Okay,
yes.
great. I
All
don't
right.
know what happened. First world problems, something with the Wi-Fi.
Yes. And I just introduced some of my professional credentials. I was going into that I have been in various kink scenes in New York and Boston and now in San Francisco for over 20 years. I was in the Eulenspiegel Society in New York and cut my teeth on kink there, which in a lot of ways, and Midori can probably speak to this, is very different than kink in California, especially when it comes to things around public sex and things of that sort. And right now, I have a strong community on the East Coast because working with Kinksters and non-monogamous folks on the West Coast is a little hard to work where you play. So that's one of the things that I have faced over time. And anything else you think I should add, Midori, professionally, personally?
Oh, goodness. Well, I, okay. And most importantly, we're friends.
Yes, we are friends, and my partner has done Forte Femme, and some other play friends and other friends of mine have done Forte Femme. So I feel vicariously Forte Femme, and I think the last time I was on something with Midori, I actually had one of her Forte Femme mugs, so it was very exciting.
Forte FM is my Women's Dominance Weekend Intensive. So I also find it incredibly refreshing and unusual that you as a therapist open and out about your own kink adventures, which, as you know, like any Californian, any American, I adore the therapeutic process, and I find it so refreshing. So thank you for being out.
Yeah, well, my inspiration was really Dossie Easton, who wrote The Ethical Slut. And I got to work with her as an intern. It was a funny story that I was getting my hours to become a licensed therapist, and I just wasn't meshing with the supervisor I had. So I asked on one of my mailing lists, hey, do you know of any kinky poly therapists? And someone was like, hey, I could talk to Dossie. And it just never even occurred to me that she was in San Francisco. And she and I hit it off really well and ended up working together for 2.5 years. And I saw her ability to be out, but also be a clinician and a teacher, and that was really inspiring. So one thing I missed from my intro was that I also teach at Golden Gate University here in San Francisco. So I teach human sexuality, I teach what I call therapy 101, I teach couples, and I try to bring that queerdo therapist perspective to it, because I think that's where working, it's great to go to institutions that skew in that direction, but being someone, and I have a few other colleagues who do this, who is a queerdo in a more conventional institution and is not only accepted but embraced. And they featured me for Pride. We did some talks about gender and empathy last year, so it was just super exciting to be the blue-haired, hard to tell on the screen, kinky poly queerdo, and just being open about it. One of the things that I talk about consent, when I teach human sexuality, I tell my students, you have given implied consent that we're going to talk about it sex. You signed up for human sexuality, you showed up. It's hard to revoke that consent because you won't get credit for the class. But you gave me implicit consent. But now I'm going to make it explicit. We're here to talk about human sexuality. We're going to talk about genitals. We might use some words that are uncomfortable. And I think it's okay for you to be uncomfortable. I just don't want you to feel harassed or otherwise marginalized. But it's a great example of starting off with, you're giving implicit consent. The folks that are watching us, implicit consent. We're going to talk about shibari. We're going to talk about consent. We might talk about sex and kink, although we'll probably try to be careful about it. But making that explicit. We started with our kids. So I have 9-year-old twins. When they were 2, would you like a hug? No? Okay. And what's interesting is I tell some parents that, and they're like, no, that's my kid. I'm going to hug that kid. And, for me, tongue in cheek a bit, that's job security, because you're teaching your kid at a very young age that it's not okay to say no. And that sometimes you'll say no and something will happen to you anyway. So
Oh,
I'm really, and 7 years later, they're still working on consent, but at least they have the basic idea of asking for permission, and it's just normalized.
ooh, I want to get back to that, but I want to take a little tangent because you mentioned
Mhm.
something that I think the viewer could really value. Dossie Easton's and Janet Hardy's book, Ethical Slut,
Yes.
and it is available out there. Does the book Ethical Slut uh, touch on consent and agency?
I believe that it does. I will confess that it has been a while since I have read it. What I will say is that I believe it's in its 3rd edition now, and the 2nd and 3rd editions have a number of exercises that she and Janet came up with that I think are valuable for any couple or any kind of relationship. The one that I use often is jealousy, so writing a letter to your jealousy. So I believe that I can't imagine that it's not woven through it. I can't speak directly to it because it's been a little while. So you caught me on a side there, but I think it's hard to have a relationship book without talking about consent.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend folks check it out. And for those for it's not just for kink, it's for all sorts. And even
Mm.
if you're not engaging in consensual non-monogamy. I think there's a lot of good things that come out of it. But back to you
me.
and your proverbial couch.
Okay.
Right? What are some of the common consent issues that show up in your office, and how do you help them?
Yeah, I want to speak to both professional and personal, and obviously obscuring details because I want to protect the identities of folks. And the theme is missing or miscommunication. And I think it breaks down to the saying that I say to pretty much every client and most of my friends, and you've probably heard me say it, which is life is uncomfortable. You can be uncomfortable now on your terms, or you can be uncomfortable later on someone else's terms. And this happens with non-monogamy. So it might be people are flirting with it, but then someone goes a little too far, so violates a trust agreement, but that opens up the conversation around, hey, do we want to do this? So someone might be afraid to say to their partner, hey, I think that person is kind of hot. But so they go and do something. And I was talking about someone about this yesterday. It's like sometimes people cheat to get caught because that at least starts the conversation. I doubt they consciously do it, like, hey, I'm going to cheat so I can talk to my partner. But it seems like the only potentially desperate way to open up that conversation. So the under communicating or lack of communication, different expectations. So between non-monogamy and with kink relationships, not being clear with what you want out of it, not being clear where a particular person wants to go. And this is where the intersection of non-monogamy and kink happen is sometimes you have a lovely partnership, but your partner's just not into your kink and you want to be able to do your kink and they're cool with it. So sometimes people will be non-monogamous for that one specific thing. Like, hey, I'm going to go do shibari with someone because you don't want to do rope, as an example. So these are common themes. If I can use some more specifics, and you and I were discussing this before the show, but I have this term which may or may not resonate with some people, which is libertarian negotiation, which is negotiating with someone before a scene and figuring out what's not okay. So these are the hard no's. But then considering that everything that is not okay is okay. That was a lot of negatives in there. So
So
if you
in
didn't
other
say
words,
it's not okay, then I can do it.
okay, so can we role play this?
Yes, and I can also give you an example too before we do that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was with a partner some years ago, and we were intimate. And at some point, they said, "I want you to do anything that you want to me." Bad thing to say in kink, as Midori could probably tell you. So I thought about this, and I thought about the things I would do that would be really awful. And I know this was an edge. It would be hubris to say that I knew what I was doing, but as we were being intimate, I gave her a light slap on the face, and I saw her shock a little bit, and then we kept going. And at the end, had a great time. And she said, "You know how I said you could do anything that you want to me?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Don't do that." Yeah. So in that particular case, it worked out okay. And there was a little bit of, Joe pushing a boundary there. Um, I could have gone horribly wrong, by the way, and I probably wouldn't do something like that now, 15 odd years later. But that was an interesting example of, um, we someone used too broad of a term, so the specificity of it. So tell me about your role play.
Okay,
Hit me.
so how about you play the libertarian consenting topping person, and
Right.
I'm going to be playing with you. So
Okay. Hey, Midori, it's nice to see you. It's been like 18 months,
mm,
and I've been watching your Patreon, and it's the first party back, and I just want to check in with you because I love playing with you. And to be honest, you've always topped me, so I'm kind of interested in topping you, but I'm kind of new to it. So So what's your deal? What's going on?
Okay. So yeah, 18 months, and I'm kind of, pent up and all that. I'm a little rusty. I could, you know, I haven't even been to my massage therapist, and that's my form of
Ooh,
bottoming.
yeah.
But yeah, I am thinking just, um, okay, here are the things that yay, I want to do is I'd love to receive flogging. I want to
Mm-hmm.
be tied up. Um, Pretty much all the usual tying up is fine by me. I got a bad knee. Don't bend my right knee right now. I'm in
Thank you. I
physio.
was going to check in about the medical things.
Yeah. Right knee, no go. Yeah. And, other than that, the usual hard limits.
Okay. Can you just refresh me of your hard limits? Because again, it's been 18 months. I mean,
Yeah.
my hard limits are don't send me to the doctor. So
Oh, that sounds like a good one. I'll go
yeah.
with that.
Okay. And then just to check in with your knee, is it better if you're sitting down?
Um, it's, I just can't have it bent. So my right knee,
Oh,
standing,
interesting.
sitting, just straight.
Oh, okay. So in that case, standing would be better. So just to pause out of the role play, what I could see happening here is, doing a nice flogging scene. Midori's kind of sinking into her bottom space. She's having a great time. We didn't discuss clothing, but she's naked. And then I slip my hand along her bum and put my fingers right up into her wet, whatever you want to call it.
My
Um,
bits.
and what happens for you in that moment?
Oh my God. And inside my thought bubble is I
Right,
said any of the usual bondage positions. I didn't talk about sex at all. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
right.
And
So just to pause, like, is
yeah,
that a consent violation? And it's there. I don't know that there's a right answer to that question. And I would be curious on your thoughts of that. But see, so what I overheard a person who's been in the scene longer than I have. One of their first questions is this kink or is this sex? And that will set that tone because if I have my definition of sex, like if it's going to be purely kink as the more um, reasonable person, I'm just going to stick to kink. If it's going to be sex, I might mix that in there. But the person, I doubt they're a sociopath. I mean, there are sociopaths out there, but a person of going, well, they didn't say I couldn't put my hands in there inside of them.
well, I can role play a sociopath, but that's another class
Yeah,
entirely.
that's another. We could talk about. I actually have a great example of that later too.
Yeah.
But it's that sort
Um,
of thing where it's, California is what I call a yes means yes state.
mhm.
So for sexual contact, it has to be yes, I want to do that thing, versus no means no. But
Many of us in the education and the consent discussion circles lately have been talking about consent violation versus consent incident.
right, yes.
And have you been? Oh,
I've heard it a little bit, and it
mhm.
actually came up recently with a friend, not with a client. But yeah, so I was like, oh, so that's got me. I don't feel as tapped into the conversation as I could be, but I think it's really important, and especially in light of the current history with Me Too. And this is an unpopular thing that I say to my some of my progressive friends. They say, well, so and so should have known better. He should have known that he couldn't do that thing to that person that he did. And my answer to it is how? Dad, brothers, uncles, teachers, priests, coaches, they're all potentially teaching bad behavior. So
Mhm.
if these are your primary teachers, then that explains the behavior. It does not excuse the behavior. But I think it sometimes will help some folks go, so, well, they still should know better. I thought, how? Now it's been pointed out to them that this is a consent violation or this is not something that you should do. Then at that point, yes, you need to change your behavior. And it may take time. I heard someone once say it takes 7 miles to turn around an aircraft carrier. Behavior change takes time. So on the one hand, I want to work with people who do these incidents to try to get them into a space of being more aware of the impact of their behavior.
Mm-hmm. And the poor role models and the messaging that we get from general culture.
Yeah.
And I find we don't discuss consent. And this was one of the reasons why Shibari Studies allowed me to have this Consent Dojo space, that it requires building up a muscle, right? It requires figuring this out. Maybe one day, yeah, practicing. And when we get to thinking about consent at the moment of playing with rope or playing with sexuality, and if it's only coming up at that point, when rest of our lives have been all the bad examples and the iteration of poor behavior, then we don't have the tools here.
Yeah. And there's this interesting conditional piece that happens. So I don't know if you know Dimitri Martin, he used to be on Saturday Night Live, a comedian. He has this routine where he says, you know, I went to the clothing store and I picked up a few items and I went to the dressing room and a person came over and said, do you need help? I said, no, I just have a few items. I'm going to try them on. And then she says, well, if you need help, my name is Jill. And then she walks away. And then he thought to himself, like, I've never met someone with a conditional name. If I don't need help, is her name Sally? And I love that. And where that riffs for me is like, hey, sushi, or hey, Midori, I'd like to go for sushi if you would like to go for sushi. Versus, hey, Midori, I'm going for sushi. Would you like to come? So in the first example, you're making your decision conditional on the other person. If you like sushi, I will go. But rather than owning, I want sushi, I want you to come with me. But whether or not I'm going to pick sushi is not up to you. And this happened in my own relationship, with my partner. What do you want for dinner? I don't know. What do you want for dinner? I don't know. What do you want? And you know the two of us. You can imagine this going back and forth. And finally, one of us will say, what I want for dinner is for you to pick dinner. Yeah. But to me, these weave into consent. Like in some ways, you're consenting for dinner, right? Like my kids are consenting for hugs, which is physical touch. So how do you weave this into the things that you're doing on a daily basis?
So conditional offer versus, how would we describe the second one in the sushi example?
I would like an ownership offer. Like,
ownership
this is what
offer.
I want to do. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to do it?
Bringing that to rope and kink, I can totally see how a conditional offer would be the basis for the scene. And I would think of that as service topping.
Okay.
And service topping as differing from topping from the bottom. So for viewers, I very much separate that. Topping from the bottom is when the person bottoming, without the agreement of the person topping, directs the play in a way that the person topping is like, hey, who's the boss here?
Right.
Whereas service topping is centering the scene upon the bottoming person's desire. So in the sushi example, if I were to say the same thing, if you want sushi, hey Joe, call on me, we'll go to sushi. It might actually be that I want to introduce you to sushi when you're ready.
Right. It's a subtle sort of a thing. And I can speak as a service topper because I love topping, but I also love teaching. But topping wears me out and teaching wears me out. Bottoming fills me up and therapy or introverted things fill me up. Yeah, so it's an interesting, subtle sort of a thing. I had one experience at a party where someone asked me, hey, so how you doing? And I said, it's really great, but I haven't had this act that I really want to do. It's like, oh, do you know so-and-so? And I said, no. I said, well, so-and-so has done that act to women, but she wants to do it to a assigned male at birth person. I said, it's super cool. So they walked me over to this person and said, the two of you have something in common, and then walked away, which was like this interesting intro. But then I got to say, hey, so and so told me about this thing. I would love to talk to you about it. Would you be interested in that? And I really tried to think about not if you're interested. So this is where the weird subtlety is. Like, even if they weren't interested, they get to they see my offer and they get to respond to it. So I'm really pro of speaking your truth and then having people come along with it.
Now, this is something, and I think pardon the pun, ties into that which I often see when I'm working in Forte FM and my
Hmm.
uh, female and feminine center students, especially for folks
Mm.
and socialized that way, where there's this whole preamble of apology that goes into a sort of ask. So it will go something like this, right? So let's say I'm interested in, let's say that I want to bottom in rope,
Hmm.
right? And if you're my partner, it might come out like this. Hey, honey, if you're up for it, and if you're interested, but only if you're interested, I'd be open to helping you learn rope bondage. And yeah, but of course, if it's not
So
your
many
thing, that's all
caveats.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so many caveats, right?
And that's interpreted as being nice and polite.
Yeah.
So as the therapist here, could you break that down for me and the viewers and then give some alternative? And
So looking
the
at
inside information is I really do want to get tied up.
the inside information, so just reiterate this to me. So you're coming to me because you want to get tied up and you know that I'm interested in learning rope.
Hmm.
Okay, so I'm sorry. I had a moment of brain freeze there. So start again.
Okay. So initial and common example. You're my partner, and
Hmm.
in my mind and my loins, I want to get tied up.
Okay.
Okay. That's the situation. And I say to you, hey honey, um, you know, if you'd be up for it and if you're interested, I know you've been wanting to learn a little bit of rope bondage. I'm certainly happy to volunteer to be tied up, but only if you want to. And if not, that's totally cool.
Right. So just looking at that, to me, that comes across as wishy-washy. I don't
Hmm.
know how if that was your meant. So what, from your point of view, where I would start, which is something I love, but I haven't even touched on yet, which is consent for conversation, which is, hey, can I talk to you about something? I'm excited about it. It's really not a good time. I've got this work thing on my head, but come back in a half an hour. So this is this, I know this is an aside. People don't realize that you can do consent for conversation. So how many times has it happened to you where you say to your friend, and it's a good friend, how you doing? And what do they do? And I use vomit because it's disgusting. They just put all their stuff on you, and you may not have been ready for that. So it may be, hey, how you doing? I'm in a rough spot. Can I share some of it with you? I'm thank you. I don't know if I'm available for that right now. That sort of a thing. Which I think we forget that you can have consent there.
I am liking where this is going.
Yes.
Consent for conversation, because we often, and typically, sex, rope, and consent, we're talking about the things we can and cannot do during play. And
Right.
I would like to hear you elaborate on, and for the viewers, what consenting for conversation is different than consenting for play, and what choices one has in consent for conversation. Okay, so
Hmm.
how's it different? What are the choices, and why is it a good idea?
Yeah. Well, let me start with the last part. The why is it a good idea is I think you're most likely going to get a more valuable or favorable outcome if the person is prepared and able to say, I'm not able to show up for this now, or I am able to show up for this now. I think sometimes we just unload on people because we don't want them to say, no, you can't talk to me. Yeah, so that's the why. The I what's interesting for me is, the real differences might be around physical danger or trauma with, consent for touch or consent for activities. However, you can also re-traumatize people with if you don't have consent for conversation. This is the whole idea of a content warning on a Facebook post where someone's going to talk about sexual assault or someone's going to talk about violence or something like that. I saw someone recently said, can you please put content warnings on spiders because they are deathly afraid of spiders, and they kept getting spiders in their Facebook feed. So some people think that that's going too far. I would prefer to be warned that something is coming up. So I think there's really not a huge difference between the two. And what was the middle thing? I feel like
So what's the
Crystal
difference
wanted to, yeah.
between what's the difference between consent for conversation versus consent for play?
Okay.
Right. And did I lose my own questions too?
I don't see a huge difference. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And what are the options available? What are the advantages?
Oh, that's what it was. Yes, that was the, how can you reply? So in the consent for conversation, hey, Midori, I'd like to share something with you. Are you open to that? Yes, no, maybe, that sort of thing. What I
Or
like,
it could be like, yes, but only if it's less than 5 minutes.
yeah,
Because
totally. Totally. This was like, when I worked for Burning Man for 10 years, when my boss was really busy, it was like I would sometimes say to them, hey, I need 5 minutes. Boom. And then we get done versus like, hey, I need to talk to you, which is vague. So this gets into the specifics. So I know
and
people go back and forth about the fries model. I still like it. So
elaborate the
freely,
price, please.
so the
Yeah.
fries model, freely given, revocable, informed, enthusiastic, and that's the one where people are sometimes shaky on, and specific. And I'm huge on specific because specific can be this conversation, this time, this place. I tell my human sexuality students, just because we're talking about sex in the classroom doesn't mean you go to lunch and then talk about sex. Because you gave consent to talk about sex in the class, but for example, I do this anonymous poll where you raise your hand for someone else's answers to the poll. So you might be raising your hand for, I've masturbated in the last 6 months, and it may not be you. But if everyone raises their hand, it's obvious that everyone in the class has masturbated in the last 6 months. It's still not okay to talk about it over the lunch table because you have not gotten consent for that. Does that make a little more sense?
Yes.
Putting a time frame on it, I think, is important. So like, hey, I need to talk to you about something with the kids. I'm in work mode. Can we talk about it after the kids go to bed? Something like that. So you have a definite coming back to it. Because some people see it as avoidance. Hey, is this a good time to talk about it? No. There was a New Yorker cartoon some time back where it's like this executive at a desk. It's like, how about never? Is never a good time for you? And that happens with conversations. People don't want to have that conversation, so they never say that it's okay.
Oh, gee, that sounds like my mother.
My one line description of Freudian psychotherapy, if it's not one thing, it's your mother.
I've heard that. On the boundary setting, on consent to conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you up for talking about play, or are you up for talking about X? There's something that I've noticed that I think we could all stand to be mindful is the setting appropriate expectation. Is it really like, I just need a minute? Or is it
sometimes.
an hour?
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's specific.
and if you think about what Reed and Marsha teach in Cuddle Party, is no is a gift. If you're a no, say no. If you're a maybe, say no. If you're a yes,
And
say yes.
I want to bring this back towards the practicals for our viewers around rope and play, because I know you and I can get social
deep into the weeds. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. How can no be a gift in rope bondage play? And Yeah, how? Why
Well,
is it a gift?
you're
Why is it the
you're at
gift?
an event
Yeah,
and you're a very popular rigger, and the fourth person of the day, after you've done 3 intense scenes and they saw how wonderful it wants to scene with you. And you really do want to scene with them because you think it would be really fun, but you don't have the energy to do it. So similar to what the two of you were talking about last time, no, thank you. I think that's a great idea. I've done 3 other scenes today, so I'm worried that I wouldn't be able to be present.
okay.
So I hear your no. Let's check in tomorrow. And in fact, actually, you know what? I'm not doing anything between breakfast and lunch. You want to put that on the calendar? When you've got these weekend long parties, it's like you got to use all the time that you've
Yeah.
got.
Now, you just
So,
gave an example from the side of the person topping.
mhm.
For the viewers, I would love a specific example from the bottoming side of no as a gift, because oftentimes that's hard.
Yeah. Well, and what I was going to say earlier is that we're taught in an overarching way to quote unquote take care of people,
Mhm.
which means, if I say no, this person's going to be really disappointed. And, I know that they're operating from a place of scarcity because unfortunately they're a dude in the scene and it's tougher for dudes sometimes. And I'm kind of operating from this place of plenty. So this is all going on in my head. It would be okay if I said yes, but, it's really, I'm kind of tired. I think it's the similar sort of thing. It's, can you be present for that person? Can you be present for that activity? Because I think that's where the no is a gift. But at the same time, it's still a rejection. So um, there's probably a better word for rejection in that term. And I think we've talked about this in the past, maybe in office hours, how sometimes it's a pivot. Like, yes, I want to do this. I can't do it now. When can we do it in the future? That sort of a thing.
On the rejection thing, uh, yeah, and like any human, I'm guilty of that as well, because
Hmm.
being liked, right? And being wanted, validation, of interpreting a no on an activity as a no about me.
Mm, yeah.
That rejection for a scene or rejection for an activity, rejection for playing with rope tonight as a rejection of my wholeness.
Ooh.
And yeah,
So the interesting question is that a conversation for you and your therapist in terms of, how bound is your identity, pun intended, how bound is your identity into this needing to say yes? And I would be curious as your therapist, is
yeah,
this a cultural thing
yeah,
because of from where you come and the yeah, and military experience, for example, you don't get to say no,
right.
right? In a lot of cases.
Yes, I agree that it, and for those who do have therapists in your life, that it is a conversation to be held with a therapist. I also think it is a discussion worthy to specify in general kink conversation around negotiation.
Yeah.
Marsha does a great, beautiful job about all the gorgeous ways in which no is a gift and how to say so.
Yeah.
Uh, and in general, I don't think we have the conversation that no or a boundary is a no or a boundary to that activity, not the person.
That's the specificity. And this also happens in a more general sense. When someone does something that violates a boundary or just annoys another person and they get called out on it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a bad person. It means that you may have been a bad actor in that moment. But I think
Ooh,
what happens is in our brains, we go to, oh, I fucked up and I'm bad. What were you going to say?
I have a question from the viewer, if you're up for that.
Sure.
Okay. So far, our examples have been people we want to play with and
Hmm.
not available in the now.
Right.
Okay. But what if, and I quote, how do we say no as in a no, no forever
Yeah.
to that activity, this activity, no forever, one.
Yeah.
Two, no forever to you. And
Right.
the person said, I find this to be the hardest actually.
Yeah. And I think the viewer is not alone in that part. Um, I think about this in terms of, can a therapist reject a client? And my take on that is a therapist can reject a client if they believe that they can't service that client, or they can't um, be a good therapist for that client. So where this comes down to is, there was a newspaper article in the Times a few years ago where a woman who had a Christian background rejected a gay and lesbian client, and the supervisor said, "Oh, that's fine, we'll assign them to someone else," and then reported her for discrimination. And my take on this is, in that case, she rejected the person out of hand because of who they were in a class.
Mhm.
Versus if she had met the person and said, I'm going to try to work with this with my supervisor, and then figured out that they can't work with that person, then it becomes about them. I can't be there for you. So the reason I tell this story is, when you're doing that no, it's really important to make it about you saying no, you having a boundary. So being gracious, thank you for the offer. I really appreciate you reaching out to me and taking the time. I have to be honest with you that, it could be that you're overloaded. It could be that, that's not something I'm interested in engaging in. And if it has to be specific, sometimes you have to reject people, but you want to do it in a way that's gentle. Um,
Gentle
and
does not require the explaining that
less
we
is more.
yeah.
Yeah. That's the
I
other thing about it is.
yeah. I
So how do you
find
say thank you, but no thank you?
right. And without having to explain, and I often see, and with the students I work with, my one-on-one coaching, I will also see like some sort of a need to explain the no, even if the explanation is not true.
Right.
Where um, I'll hear them saying the no, not now, when they mean no forever.
Right. Because
No,
I don't want to hurt somebody.
right. They don't want to hurt somebody. But back to your point about uncomfortable now versus uncomfortable down the road and forever.
Yeah.
Does so many of us are socialized to have to explain our boundary, have to
Hmm.
justify it, to have the person happy for it, even if the reason is false.
Yeah. So like, and I think that's part of the taking care of.
Hmm.
I'm looking at Mr. Gregg's comment. Are there any good techniques to help enable someone to express their authentic desires or lack of, particularly when the ability to do so is situationally or socially limited? So that sounds to me like, how do we empower people, and how do we encourage people to be able to speak their truth, especially when we're coming from a place of privilege? How do we help give people their voices? And I think one way we do that is we listen to them and we empathize with them, and we don't presume we know what they're thinking.
On a practical matter, because I agree with all the above that we don't get to have a practice. We don't get to practice saying no without having to put ribbons and glitter on it.
Yeah.
And for the viewers, if you have a friend, and this is like an extension on Marsha's ridiculous ask, if you have a friend with whom you can do the no exercise, say no without explaining it, especially if you tend to over explain. And
Yeah.
this particularly applies to no forever to the activity and no forever to, and or no forever to the person.
Yeah.
Um, and this exercise might be, uh, and let's say I'm prone to that, which I was when I was younger. I'm finding myself as I grow into my broadhood, as being a broad, um, and I've had to learn to understand that my no is a rightfully earned entitlement, that I
And
am
sufficient.
entitled to my no, right?
Yeah.
So I was somebody that wanted to over-explain, make it nice, the Japanese thing, right?
Hmm.
So can we do this where you ask me, and you can get intimate and let's get specific around rope and sex to address this around rope and sex
Right.
for our viewers, and I am going to attempt all manners of all different types of no's, and
Okay.
I would like for you to give me a thumbs up if I did well, thumbs
Okay.
down if I could do better.
Ooh, I feel like I'm on the spot here. So going
Yeah.
back to earlier, like, so hey Midori, thanks for updating me on where you're at. So I was thinking, there's this new suspension rig, right? So I would love to suspend you and then, kind of waist height. And I've got my new strap-on harness and this amazing cock that I think you would really love. And so I would love to suspend you and maybe fuck you in the mouth and fuck you from behind. What do you think?
Okay. Uh, not tonight because yeah. Let's see. I'm on my period. I'm really tired, and that sounds like really fun, but I'm just really not ready for that. And yeah. Okay. And what's
Yeah,
going
too
on?
much hemming and hawing, too much, so matter of fact is really good.
Okay. Let me try.
So
Let me try my
try
answer
again.
again.
Yeah.
Version
Okay.
two. Joe, thank you for putting so much thought into that. But no, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's direct.
Mm.
And someone might follow up, well, would you be interested in that in the future?
Okay, so go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, thank you. I appreciate you letting me know. Is that something you'd be into maybe tomorrow or in the future?
Mm, no, I no. That is a no.
Yeah. And I think that's fine. And the keep it simple is really important. When my partner was pregnant, I got one piece of useful parenting advice given to me by another kinkster, which blew me away at the time. And what they said was, lots of people will give you parenting advice, nod your head and say thank you. Don't try to explain to them why they're wrong or why they're right or whatnot. So I think that was fine. And you know what? The person may feel a little bummed. They get to feel bummed because they really wanted to do this with you, but they have to manage those feelings. It's not your job to manage those feelings. It's your job to manage, like, all right, I did that with integrity and I feel okay with that.
This part is so important to the audience. Would you repeat that it is not their job to manage somebody else?
It is not anyone's job to manage someone else's feelings. You can trigger feelings in people. So when it comes down to it, you don't want to be a dick, to be blunt. But at the same time, in the end, they're responsible for their feelings. They may reach out to you to help with that or to friends, but we don't need to solve other people's feelings. And I think this happens all the time if you think about couple interactions, and especially when you have a very logical person and a very not logical person. And I happen to be a very scientific and mystical person, so I fall somewhere in the middle. Um, Someone expresses a feeling, this person's uncomfortable, so they try to logic it out so that they will feel better, versus saying, I hear you, that's rough, and I'm sorry you're going through that experience, versus like trying to problem solve. So I think just being simple and letting that person know that you can support them. But some people here may say that and it's like, well, that sounds kind of weird. Like you can make someone feel bad and then they have to deal with it. It's like, well, am I intentionally making someone feel bad? So maybe I had high expectations of like, of course Midori is going to do this with me, and then I feel disappointed. So I was too far in the future. Might be, well, Midori does last year, 2 years ago, too far in the past. What's the present moment? What's happening right now?
So for
Right here,
those,
right now.
the viewers out there that have had a hard time saying no, I speak directly to you because I hear this a lot. You can be kind to yourself and kind to others. One, by saying no. This is kindness to yourself and kindness to others.
Yeah.
You are not responsible for how others react to your truth.
Yeah. And remembering that emotions and feelings are by nature irrational. So they don't always make sense. So sometimes we try to make sense out of it. And you may feel bad after saying that no, but that's something worth examining. But I hope that if people have integrity and they can just simply say no, then that will help.
So I want to shift to another topic we thought we might discuss.
Mm-hmm.
How to deal with revocation of consent. And can you explain to our viewers about revoking or revocation or taking back of consent?
Yeah. So I think in that case, so it might be that we agreed to do something in a scene and either it's not going well or I'm just not feeling it and I'm done. So how do you and I think of consent as a conversation, and I see an interweaving of consent, negotiation, um, before, during, and after care, and safe words. They all can work well together. So I think that's why it's important to have a safe word, because the red safe word could be I'm done. And it could be I'm done because I'm bored, or it could be I'm done because, my leg has gone to sleep. But agreeing that there's a way to end this activity where there's no bad feelings. And again, you can get into the over explaining. I think sometimes people will want to give at least a small explanation, like, hey, I know that we agreed to do this, but I have to be honest, I'm not feeling it. And what I'm noticing is my mind is wandering a little bit. So I think it would be a good idea to stop and maybe we can move on to some aftercare,
Okay.
something to that effect. Now, what can be really interesting, and this is where you can build into, and I wanted to talk about this, how do you make consent sexy? I'm going to give you an example of a scene that I saw a few years ago with a few other things mixed in. Two people doing an interrogation scene. And they knew each other pretty well, but they wanted to be able to moderate the intensity. So the way it worked, but they didn't want to be like, hey, pause, how you doing? I know we're doing this intense interrogation scene, but I just want to check it. Really disruptive. They wanted it to flow. So what they did was that the bottom, the person being interrogated, had three names: Alpha, Beta, and Charlie. And the top had a phrase, and the phrase was something like, and I don't want to get into politics, but of course I know there's Trek politics. I give up. I'm going to join the Romulan secret police. So that was the I need to end the scene for the top.
Mm-hmm.
Now for the bottom, it was really interesting because as they negotiated hard limits, but they realized that they wanted to up the intensity. So the green safe word, and you get to have green safe words, by the way. We talk about yellow and red. The green safe word was able. So as the person was interrogating them, if they were saying able, that meant that things were going along well. If they moved on to Bravo or Beta, that meant I'm getting close to the end, but I want you to up the tempo. And then Charlie was I'm done. Now they still had the red and the yellow safe word for, like this rope is pinching me or whatnot. But it gave a whole variety of choices because you could do able, and then the top gets bored, and then it's like, I'm going to join the Russian or the Romulan secret police. You could do able Charlie. Like, I don't want to up the intensity. So it allowed a way with in the context of the role play to change the negotiations a little bit without having to stop everything and move on. So the reason I bring that up is it may have been agreed that you were going to intensify, but the bottom realizes able was way enough for me. I can't go to beta and Charlie. So then these are pre-agreed. So this is why I think specific negotiation can be really powerful, because if you were looking about that, that would be like really, really cool. It's like, wow, after they gave up the first name and then they got to the second name, it got more intense. Like it could make a really interesting scene to watch. And they're using this safe word negotiation in process as it's happening.
I like this example of the technical safe words and
Mm-hmm.
the pacing emotional, the
Yeah. So,
qualitative, technical versus qualitative.
and what I'm thinking about is, it's funny because on our interface we see director not visible as part of our interface, right? Uh, I'm thinking about Bill Murray or Robin Williams, and frequently when they were acting, the directors would just say like riff, or Deadpool, Deadpool and his friend riffing on names for his ugly face.
Yeah.
Bill Murray, the famous scene from Caddyshack where he does the, you know, $1 million shot, all ad libbed. So what I see is those able beta Charlie and I'm going to join the Romulan secret. Those are like directions. Those are like from the director, and then from within there you get to do the thing that you're doing.
Nice. Uh, I'm going to pick that up, and I just might drop it into. I'm teaching a interrogation and military play class later this month.
Yeah.
I just
And
might
if you want
drop.
to talk more about it, we can talk more about it.
Yes. Um, so it leads me to on the revocation of
Mm-hmm.
consent, right? I think yes, I do know that there's a lot of pressure out there that wants consent given, that it should not be revoked.
Right. Aren't there still states in the Union in the United States where if you give consent for sex, you can't revoke it? I mean, this was a thing for a while somewhere, which just
I'm
sounds absurd
curious.
to me. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and I also think that you can build into your negotiations. And, I know some of your Forte Femme work, but I love the how do you know when you're done? How do you know when things are going well? How do you know when things are not going well? So I think if you're building that into your uh, your negotiation, then that's going to help you for when things might need to be done. Now, if you're a good no, you're hopefully not getting into situations as often as you might where you want to bail out in the middle, because and this is the uncomfortable now, uncomfortable later. Well, I said yes, but I didn't really want to do it, and now I have to get out of it. Versus saying no, which would have been uncomfortable, but would have been a lot easier in the grand scheme of
What about on the revocation?
things.
And this is squarely in your area because I don't deal with trauma, right?
Right.
In the midst, whether topping or bottoming, no matter.
Hmm.
I think it's often discussed from the bottoming perspective, but it really doesn't matter. In the midst of a scene, a consent needs to be revoked, but their conditioning in life is if you don't like something that's happening to you, at you, to just endure it and get out of it.
Yeah.
That
And that's
freeze.
tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why, again, I think it's really important to have a supportive relationship. So you talk about the difference between a relationship and a scene. So hopefully you're choosing play partners for scenes, but people in your relationships where you can have that dialogue, where they might know your trauma history. But things can come up. People don't realize that something's traumatic until someone touches their neck and all of a sudden they kick them across the room. Just
Yeah.
specific example, right? So part of it, I think, is when you do that negotiation, try to include those hard limits that you know about. And especially if you know it's something that the other person really, really enjoys. It's like, if you want to do something with someone and they really like humiliation play and you can't do that, don't say yes. But also understand what they mean about humiliation play. Another interesting negotiation thing from the past. Top negotiation with bottom. Bottom says, all this stuff is great, no humiliation. So in the middle of the scene, the bottom, who was signed female at birth and top is signed male at birth, said, "Oh, daddy, call me a slut." And he was like, "Wait, hold on. I thought you said no humiliation." And she's like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Well, you want me to call you a slut, and you called me daddy." It's like, "Oh, that's not humiliating. That's hot." Yeah. So what they didn't realize was, you can call me a slut, but don't call me a worthless slut, because that's the worthless slut would be humiliating. But for the male cis het top, anything that was like, slut or the C word or whatever, that was something that was humiliating, that he thought would be humiliating. So it was that's the missing negotiation in that moment.
Mhm.
Oh, I
And,
just did something weird.
and it's very subjective. Can you see me, hear me?
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
minimized you, which I would never do.
Don't minimize me
Yeah.
because I'll
So,
maximize myself.
well, and the point I'm trying to make is that consent can be sexy.
Hmm.
It can also be flexible. So Dossie, if I remember correctly, likes to think about boundaries not as walls, which I think of more as limits, but as where people meet. So like national boundaries. And sometimes you're great being right on the border, or sometimes you need to be back in the capital where it feels safer.
Oh, nice.
Um,
I want to go back to, I'm reinterpreting revocation of consent because the note that I
okay.
took around our conversation is how to deal with revocation of consent. So we talked
Right.
about the mechanism that we build
Hmm.
into the scene, the qualitative safe word along with the technical safe words, right?
Hmm.
The mechanism we built in to allow for adjustments and revocation, right?
Right.
Uh, and we also talked about that triggers or surprising reactions that suddenly need to cause revocation. Talked about that. What about after the scene? After a scene where there was a revocation of consent.
Say more about that. So
All
you
right.
mean the like I didn't say that you could slap me, right? Like the earlier example,
Sure. Okay,
or
let's use
not doing it in the future.
let's use that example of the slap, right?
Right.
So the scene ends and
Hmm.
the revocation of consent will cause feelings for both parties. We're talking about
Hmm.
right after the scene.
Yeah.
And what are some of the feelings that might come up and how do we handle each of ours or
Yeah.
others' reality? What's the
What I
potential?
had Yeah, I mean, what I have found that works for me is that I make sure that I negotiate aftercare with the person, but I also like to make sure that I have some backup with other people that I am connected with. So if there are hurt feelings afterwards, I don't need the other person to take care of me. I can have someone else. And it's almost like having a designated driver. And this is, I tend to go to longer weekend long parties. So the first day is freaking like, where are you at? Hey, can you be my backup person? Hey, what's my blanket consent for the weekend? Oh, I can bite you anytime, that sort of thing. So I think making sure you're not making the other person take care of you is paramount. And respecting that they are taking care of themselves in that moment. So, I really appreciated you playing with me. I realized that this is probably something I don't want to do again. And so right now, I'm going to say, I appreciate that you did it with me now. And I would appreciate you not asking to do it again. Yeah, which could cause some hard feelings. So it could cause shame. It can cause guilt. It can cause anger. It can cause exasperation or frustration. It can cause embarrassment. Like, oh, what did I do wrong? It could be that you did everything right, but it was wrong for that person in that moment. So let people have their feelings, empathize with those feelings, but then also if you have feelings, make sure you're not making the other person take care of them. So don't make it about you. Is there anything else that you need from me? Are we complete with this scene? I know we discussed this kind of aftercare, but I'm sensing that that's probably not what I want. What do you want? That sort of a thing. So, and it might be if you're doing a one-on-one scene and it doesn't go well and people part their ways, you have a friend to call up that you can check in with. If it's a bigger party, that sort of a thing. In the more difficult case, maybe it's that you have to journal or that you have to do some processing work. Again, time heals all wounds is bullshit. All wounds take time to heal. So, and you need to do something about it. So the most important thing is not to put it on the other person.
And going further with the after the revocation of consent scene,
Mm-hmm.
what are, okay, let's see, or let me rephrase that.
Okay.
When consent goes haywire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's call it a consent incident, not intentional violation of
Right.
a boundary, or we tripped over something we didn't expect.
Yeah. Didn't expect
Okay.
you to go there. Yeah.
Yeah, didn't expect to go there. And for the viewer, to help the viewer, what are possible emotional or bodily, somatic bodily symptoms that may indicate to the person experiencing it that I'm having a reaction to that scene that did not go as planned.
Right.
And
So
the reason I ask this, for viewers' sake, is quite often I will hear of people having it. Sometimes they'll be able to identify it as bottom drop or top drop, or having unidentifiable, unsettled feelings, which I'll have you list at
mm-hmm.
some point after a scene and not be able to pinpoint it, or then having a reaction and then responding in unproductive ways. But if
Yeah,
we
in the
know about
moment,
those
often.
reactions, yeah, yeah. So,
So again, part of the answer is preparation. So it's knowing your body and how you react to things. So I happen to have lumbar stenosis, which is narrowing of the spinal column. And I know that when I get stressed, I feel it right there. And if I get really, really stressed, my back can go out. And that's how bad it is. I also feel tension here. I sweat. My voice gets a little bit tight. So if I notice any one of those things happen, to me, that's data. I pay attention to that and go, all right, I'm having a reaction to this. And in the moment, I might say, hey, I'm noticing I'm having a reaction to this because I'm having some physical feelings and I'm having some emotional feelings, which I'm going to go deal with. But I'm wondering if I can check in with you later just to see how you're doing, and I would just want to be able to share my experience. Is that something that would work for you? That's the name it in the moment, but not have to process it in the moment. And the sometimes it's a vague feeling. It's like something doesn't feel right. So I would try to make some time to sit with that. It's like, is there a quiet place you can go to? I joke around that sometimes my kids must think I'm incontinent because I'm always going to the bathroom, but it's one of the few places that's quiet and private in my house. Can you take a little moment of, don't shove it to the side, but think of it as data. Your psyche, whatever you want to call it, your unconscious processes, if you're a CBT person, you know, uh, are
cognitive
they trying to tell
behavioral
you?
therapy, folks. Cognitive
Right.
behavioral
That's a whole
therapy,
nother funny thing.
not
Yes.
cock and
Not.
ball torment.
Yeah,
Not in this
although
case.
as we discussed, a friend of mine and I want to do a scene where it's CBT with CBT, and I don't know which one would be worse, the cock and ball treatment or the CBT therapy, based on my background. But what I'm saying, that noticing, getting in touch with your body. Yeah. So you and I think, are aligned with intimacy is about connection, and it's connection between people, but it's also connection to yourself. So are you paying attention to your physicality so that you know? Um, and if you're close enough with a partner, as you said before, you can probably see it. And it's like, yeah, something's going on for you. Are you all here? What's happening?
For food for thought for the viewers, the following symptoms may be or may not, but may be for some people related to something not going right in a scene.
Mm-hmm.
But some of you, it might happen where it may be that you feel irritable. Maybe you
Mm-hmm.
feel regret. Maybe you feel lethargic. As Joe mentioned, certain parts of your body more tense. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
a sense of being distracted or 1,000 thoughts going through.
Mm-hmm.
Restlessness and not being able to sleep or sleeping too much. Uh,
Imposter syndrome.
yeah, yeah. Imposter syndrome, self-doubt, insecurity, um, over excitement, and not being able to come down to functionality, right? These are some symptoms you may experience. Now, Joe, if somebody has not played yet or not had enough play opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
and we're talking about having people paying attention to their own symptoms and reactions, right? How
Yeah.
can I, if I'm a person who hasn't played before, know or have some inventory of reactions that might indicate that this isn't going well?
Well, part of it is taking it slow,
Mhm.
right? Part of it is self-knowledge around, like say you're doing shibari, there's probably aspects of it that are claustrophobic. And do you have a discomfort with that sort of thing? And I would also encourage people to welcome what happens, even if it's a little distressing, because that's how you get that knowledge. I was thinking about you and I pinged you and asked you if Shibari does facial bondage, because I was going to talk about creative ways to do safe words. But when I was thinking about that, it's like if you're going to do facial bondage on me and my mouth is gagged, I'm probably going to go deep into like a subspace or a bottom space. And I noticed Mr. Gregg put a comment about it being hard to indicate that something is happening. So making the safe word, whatever it is, as easy as possible, so that you can even say, "Hey, I'm new at this, and I don't really know what's going to happen." So I want to make the safe word super simple. And in that gagged case, I think we've talked about this in the past because I know we have some. You've got your rubber chicken flogger. One of my friends introduced to me to the idea of using squeaky toys or bells as safe word indicators, particularly when you're gagged. But for me, also, I find it a lot easier to squeeze, a squeaky toy twice than to form words sometimes. So that's a
Mhm.
creative way. Now, you want to be careful about your squeaky toys, because if you're doing this really performative, intimate shibari scene and it's getting to be too much and you hear moo, moo, that might break the mood because your squeaky toy is a cow squeaky toy. But it's this idea that you can be creative. It can just be hand squeeze, two squeezes back, that sort of a thing. So
You
making it
know,
as easy as possible.
speaking of uncomfortable in the now, I would rather have a momentary, slightly take me out of my mood so I know what the hell's going on rather than finding out later that I completely committed a consent incident. So I'd
Yeah,
rather hear the moo and
because that'll kind of snap you out of it. Yeah.
yeah.
And I don't know if that answers that question. What else? I'm.
You know, we got about, it's towards the end of our time together.
Mhm.
Do you, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, would you have some specific homework or easily practicable consent muscle building exercise for people to to try between now and the next Consent Dojo?
Yeah, so I would build on what Marsha B last time is practicing your no's when you're a no, but also examining your bids. So are you making your bids contingent on other people? I would like sushi if you would like sushi. So if you hear that coming out of your mouth, how can I say this in a way that empowers me? I want sushi, would you like to come? Versus if you would like sushi, I would like to go. So I would recommend practicing those things. I would also maybe recommend a little bit of reflection. It doesn't have to be meditation. When I talk about mindfulness, it's everything from a friend of mine turned me on to this Ram Dass recording that someone from Glitch Mob put ambient music under. And it's just like it takes you from the individual to all of a sudden you are the universe in a half an hour. Yeah. If that appeals to you, do that great. If you sit zazen or you do meditation, but when you have a bodily sensation, go, oh, what's that about? Is that a physical thing? Or is that a psychosomatic thing? And we think psychosomatic is a bad word, but all it means is that the brain is influencing the body when it comes down to it. And it's amazing to me how many clients I've said, like, wait, when I'm upset, I can get a stomach ache. I'm like, yeah. And in fact, apparently there's serotonin produced in the stomach. I didn't, this is new research, right? So yeah, paying attention to your physical state, practicing your nose, and making your bids less conditional.
And for the viewers, practicing your no, paying attention to your physical state, and making things less conditional and direct. Don't wait for your next kinky or rope opportunity to practice that. Y'all remember my paper bag example? Have I told you about my grocery bag example?
I don't think so. Can you give me the quick version?
Sure. And for those of you who have heard this, just, put up with your auntie saying the same thing. But some of you, many of you are new to this. So here's my example around consent and agency and practicing are specifically saying our wants. All right. So I'm going grocery shopping. This is something that I do more frequently than playing, especially during COVID. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there I am on Bernal Heights at the Good Life grocery store. You can see it, right? It's a cute little neighborhood grocery store. I brought my little recyclable tote bag with NPR on it or whatever. And I'm going in, I do my shopping, and I'm at the checkout stand. And the checkout person's a regular person that I see all the time. So we're talking about the weather, the fog, whatever. And they're packing up a paper grocery bag. Now, this being San Francisco, at the grocery store, navigating the grocery checkout is not the easiest thing. We have the choice of paper bag, possibly plastic bag, the shop logo tote for $1, or BYO bag. So you have these 4 choices. I have a bag, and the clerk is putting it in a brand new paper bag. I could have said something, but I didn't. And they were packing, and they could have asked me, but they didn't. Okay. And so now as I'm walking out the store, I have a paper grocery bag and an empty tote bag. Did I have an opportunity to collaborate on consent at the checkout? Yes. And I missed an opportunity to create engaged consent or speaking up for my own want, which is, hey, I brought a bag. But they also forgot to, and made assumptions. Because maybe the last 3 times I asked for a paper bag or just got in the habit. We both
She's
missed
really busy or just very focused, stay on target.
We both missed the opportunity to make consent, and the term being making consent as opposed to taking or giving. So I'm walking out of the grocery store with a paper bag and an empty tote bag. And as I walk out of the grocery store, a pigeon shits on me. Did I have an opportunity to engage in consent making with the pigeon shit?
You could have worn a hat.
But no, I did not, because I did not have an opportunity to make consent because shit happens. And now I've got my grocery bag and an empty tote, pigeon shit on my head, and I'm crossing that crosswalk towards my parking spot, and there's somebody walking towards me on the crosswalk looking at their phone. As I'm approaching this situation, dun, 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 do I have an opportunity to make consent, and how do I do that? So this is my grocery bag example.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean,
So,
you can, it's a whole bunch of different things. You could, kneel on the ground and make them trip.
right?
That's a bid for consent, but not really.
Or I could assume their right away and make myself move.
Right. Yeah.
Or I could be all, as my wife would say, go Philly on his ass. Hey, I'm walking here.
Yeah.
In terms of the saying no, where in the 3 example, where could I have practiced saying no?
Definitely in the cashier example with the yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And maybe in the crossing walk example of just, if you believed it was necessary, excuse me, just to get the person's attention. So the onus is not on you to weave, but you're trying to get their attention in. That's a little bit more of an external bid versus just moving around them. Because there's a part of you that says, well, why should I have to move? Where, that puts me out of the crosswalk and I'm jaywalking, because this person is focused on their thing.
So that moment, dear viewers, seems completely trivial at the grocery store when I didn't say, no, I brought a bag.
Yeah, conditioning.
And those little tiny moments between now and the next Consent Dojo, which I believe is September 14th, and I want you to practice noticing your symptoms, practicing saying no to all the little things that you need to say no to. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's self-care. I mean, that's if you can't show up, don't say yes. It's so interesting how I've been using a bunch of both kink terms and psychedelic terms with my kids, even though they don't realize it. You could always take more, but you can't take less. Set and setting are important, but also this yes means yes, no means no, maybe means no.
Oh my God, it totally is. Even in business world, as I'm dealing in my own small business, I would much rather have a contractor or anyone I'm working with, right? A producer, a contractor, anyone I'm working with, including my office assistant, to say, no, can't do that this week. Rather than,
Yeah.
yes, boss, I'll have this done. Yes, colleague, I'll have this done by Friday, and then not deliver it. And likewise, when I'm not delivering to my yes that should have been a no, I'm letting other people down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's see.
Well, and someone in the chat points out that the having a no in the crosswalk is creating a bid for a consensual resolution to that. But by not saying anything, neither person has agency.
Exactly.
Which I think is interesting.
Very nice. Thank you. Now, as you in your profession, folks in your profession say, we're about wrapping up in time or something like that. My next guest is
We've got about 5 minutes. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on before the end of our time?
Right. Is that the phrasing? Okay. My next guest, I'm
Something
very
like that,
excited, is Sunny Megatron. So I'm bringing Sunny on,
neat.
Of the American Sex Podcast. And she's been giving a lot of thought to consent and doing some writing around that. So I'm very interested in understanding her perspective. Now, we've given some lovely homework that's absolutely actionable. And I really hope folks do that. And even if you're viewing this later, you can do this for the next, I don't know, just week. Just try it for a week. Just try it for a week. Just a week. Okay. Um, Joe, thank you. And uh, you are a practicing kink-friendly therapist, and folks can
I am.
seek you out.
Yeah, so www.jzsmft.com. And then at Facebook or on Twitter, JZSMFT. And then Instagram is Joe Fezaza, Jofezasa. And I'm a moderate social media consumer, and there's some overlap. This is what's interesting too. It's like FetLife. I have a professional, and I have a personal um, persona because I'm seeking different things for those things. Professionally, I want to connect with folks and be able to provide therapy for them, and personally, I'm trying to enjoy myself.
Right. So folks can reach out. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for consenting to come on and share thoughts and conversation. I always enjoy our work time and our personal friend time.
Yeah, it's really wonderful to have these kinds of relationships. And, I learned so much from them, and I hope that I can share that wisdom.
All right. So on that note, I will maybe see you at an office hour, huh?
Maybe so, maybe so. Thank you all in the audience. It was really an honor to be here and a pleasure.
Thank you. All right.